Hello, and welcome everybody to Think, Engage, Thrive, our show on entrepreneurship, where we showcase some of the most inspiring and innovative entrepreneurs. If you've ever thought about starting your own business, you should watch and listen. And we're going to tell you the good, the bad, and the funny stories of entrepreneurship and startups. Tonight, we have a special show. Our guest couldn't make it, and he let us know at the last minute. So tonight, the special guest is me. I realized as we were talking, a few of us, that I never told you my story. So you're watching this entrepreneurship, and you say, "Who is this guy? What does he know?" So tonight you're in luck because I'm going to tell you my story, and believe me, there's some funny stories because I did some things that a lot of people wouldn't do or shouldn't do, I should say. Anyway. But I'll tell you, it's a different feeling doing the show by yourself versus having a guest on the show. But in reality, it's just different, right? You usually got your list of questions and you've sort of had a discussion. And me, I can talk about myself for forever. So I'll start off. I'll go into the background and I'll explain to you what I did, how I did it, why I did it, again, sometimes it just it gets a little funny. But essentially, I grew up in the food business. I grew up in restaurants and, restaurants, hotels, that sort of thing. And I always thought that was my path in life. Right? When I was young, I thought, well, I'm going to own a restaurant. That's what I'll do. And I did it. I worked in that business for quite some time. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that worked in that business. And, some people really like it and some people really don't. I went to hotel management school and business management for college. And I was working, in restaurants and hotels while I was in college. And it was at that point in time where I decided that's not what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be in business for myself, but I knew that that's not what I wanted. The hours are late. It's a very difficult life, I think, to have a family. And it didn't appeal to me anymore. Didn't appeal to me working until 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning and getting out, but I still wanted to be involved in food. And I was, after I got done, and I was in New York, and I came across, there's some food stores, Balducci's, Dean and DeLuca, places like that, which really appealed to me because I thought, hey, this seems like a more organized way of doing it. So I took that and I built a food store, a food retail store, which I really enjoyed. And I started this when I was 27. And I took all my money that I had saved and set up the store. And, it was good. I was a terrible business person. I will tell you that. It was a disaster. I was a terrible leader. I was a terrible manager of processes. I was terrible at transferring my skills. There were things that I knew I could do that I never bothered to teach other people. So the effect of that was I had a lot of people who were working, but not working on the right things. And I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to work on everything, which never works. It just never works. So for 3 years, I worked 7 days a week, 12, 13, 14 hours a day. And in my mind at that time, in my immature mind, I thought, well, this is how you succeed. You work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then one day everything works out, but it doesn't. And, I recognized what my flaws were. And so I had the opportunity to sell the business, which I took very quickly. I don't think it took me more than 5 minutes to say yes when somebody made me an offer. I made a little bit of money off of it. I made a little bit more than what I had invested into it. But when you take into account my time and what I invested in it personally, physically, mentally, emotionally, I would have been better off getting a job and would have made more money over that same period of time. But, I took the money and I enrolled in graduate school at the University of Maryland and moved down to the DC area, Washington, DC area. And I went to graduate school to get my master's in business. And I thought, this is what I need. This is what I need. This is going to make me into a better business person. It's going to teach me all the things that I'm lacking. And in some respects, it I did. It did. It taught me about better ways to market, taught me about supply chain, it taught me about finance and things like that. And I really, really enjoyed finance. And I thought, this is the way I'm going to go. I want to get a job in finance. But uh, things didn't turn out that way because I got a call one day from a friend of mine who said, "Hey, there are these guys that just bought this specialty food chain down in Washington, D.C. market, and they need some help." They were real estate guys. Long story how they wound up with these stores, but they wound up with three specialty food stores that they were like mini supermarkets, but very focused on specialty products. And this is back in the 90s when you didn't have like great olive oils in the supermarket. You didn't have cheese departments in the supermarkets. And so, this was a place where you got really high quality, meat, seafood, deli, bakery. We had French pastry chefs. We had bread baking going on. I mean, beautiful stores, beautiful stores. So I went and talked to them, and they hired me while I was in graduate school. And I said, look, I'm not going to quit graduate school just to come and work. And they said, that's fine. These are the projects we need help with. So you can do them on your time. Um, Long story short, within like 2 months, I was vice president of the company, and I was working and going to school. And, I didn't go part-time. I was still going to school full-time. But I was the vice president of the company, so totally different than what I wanted, right? Now I'm back in the food business when I really wanted to do something in finance. And, the commitment they made to me was they needed to raise capital to grow the business. That was the whole focus. Couldn't sit there with three stores. It wasn't a mom and pop type of thing. They wanted to grow. They felt like they could grow and put, 12, 14 stores around. So I signed on for that. And I said, as long as I can help you raise capital, I want to learn that, understand it, get involved with the finance. And they were fine. But it was a very small operation, very lean at the top. All the effort, all the labor was in the stores. And again, we did things. We manufactured in one store for the rest of for the other two stores. Bread, for example, we manufactured pastries. We had French pastry chefs. We did that in one store. We made our own ice cream. We made our own marzipan. Marzipan. Again, Washington, D.C., very international marketplace. So we had all these people from all around the world. So we could sell all these unique items that nobody here has ever heard of, right? We had cheeses that I still can't pronounce to this day. We had little ice cream parlors in the stores. We had coffee bars, and again, this was before Starbucks it came running around. So it was extremely interesting. It was extremely interesting, and as a young entrepreneur, I think it was a good thing for me because the company was entrepreneurial. Even though I was working for them, I did invest a little bit of money in it. So I did own equity, not a huge amount, but we were enough to be recognized as, more than just a worker bee. But as I was doing this after I graduated school, I became more of an entrepreneur. And I do like that term because there were problems that had to be solved within the company as we grew. So, for example, I told you we were doing our own manufacturing of certain things. You couldn't do it in one store and ship it out anymore. You had to sort of get professional as we started to open. We opened two more stores. So I set up the commissary section. We got a warehouse. We built it out for food production and had, it was USDA regulated facilities and things like that, which was interesting, right? The problem there that created was when you're in that kind of environment and you're making 100 different breads every day and you're making, 50 different salads and all that, you still have to measure the profitability of the commissaries. And so when you're doing that, you're finding out that really most of your profit comes from your top 10 items, right? I think that most people know when you start looking at manufacturing or even selling, right? Basically 10 to 20% of your items are driving most of your business. So I came up with this idea and said, look, every year I have to come in here and every year I have to tell you that you have to invest more money in these commissaries. Well, if we set up smaller stores, where we don't have to get this, 15, 20,000 square foot footprint. We set up smaller stores, 2,000, 3,000 square feet, and just focus on the top 10 or 15 items in all these categories. And we can make sandwiches on location, and we can sell coffee and coffee, things like that. Then I think that that will drive profitability not only in the company but also in these commissaries, which we did. And I loved the small stores. I thought we could put those anywhere. We had them downtown DC and DuPont Circle, and in some of the other areas around, and Alexandria and McLean, Virginia, and places like that. So, and I thought it was I loved the idea. And then the other thing I did as an entrepreneur was we did a lot with food as gifts. So each store was sort of doing it themselves. They make gift baskets. People would come in and order, certain things, food as gifts, and I streamlined that, made it a gift center out at one of the warehouses, and we took orders over the phone, over the internet, and we basically turned that into a business. We developed a catalog, streamlined the process, and it was, and that turned out to be good. But my biggest innovation, and this was before you ever heard the term pop-up stores. I was in one of the malls one day. It was getting close to the holidays. It was like September, and you know how most stores have multiple jewelry stores. Well, one jewelry store company bought the other jewelry store company. They were closing down the repetitive stores. So I'm in one of the biggest malls in the country, which is outside of DC and Virginia, and I go down the escalator in this great location, and I see that this store is empty. It used to be a jewelry store. So I'm thinking, I wonder what they do with those at the holidays. I wonder what they do when they're empty. I doubt if it's September, you're going to be able to rent it. So I knocked on the mall management door, and I got to speak to the mall manager, and I told him who I was. And I said, I work for Southern Place Gourmet, and, what do you do with these stores? And he said, well, really can't, we really can't lease it now. Nobody's going to come in, be able to get set up and sell for the holidays. So it's really going to be after the holidays. But I get bonused on my occupancy rate. So I'd love to go into the holidays with 100% occupancy. So I said, well, maybe we could work out a deal. And I said, would you be open to letting a store open up for 2 months? Because I'm thinking we could sell food as gifts. People would like it. We could test it, see how it goes, And he made us a very good, aggressive deal on the rent. I took it back to the office, and I had the president and the CFO, and I said, how would you like to open up a store in the mall for just the holidays? And they both looked at me and went, nah, you don't understand what you're talking about. They're going to stick you down one of these aisles, one of these, and you're not going to get any traction. We'll put a lot of effort in. And I said, well, this one is right at the bottom of the escalator, which used to be, I forget the real, and their eyes widened up. They were like, seriously? I said, yeah. And here's what the guy is offering. We went over there, and the president of the company talked to him, and the president of the company was well-versed in real estate because that's what they were, real estate developers. So he understood it. And, we walked away with a deal. We went and opened up that store for 2 months and did quite well. And that sort of set up a trend where every year we would take spots in malls, whether we were in stores or whether we were in the center, just to sell food as gifts, baskets, beautiful bottles of olive oil, things that people thought were unusual, not perishables, but just non-perishable stuff. But at the time, you got to remember, in the 90s, you didn't have that stuff in every supermarket today. So, it was a wonderful thing. And it was a good way for us to push volume. It was a good way for us to, get our name out there again. So I thought it was, funny, but, it was a very good experience. And, I always go back to that because I think about the term entrepreneurship. And anytime, like some of my friends who work for companies, or I meet people and they work for companies and they say, oh, I'm miserable, the company isn't run right, I see so many opportunities to improve things. And I always say the same thing. Put your money where your mouth is. Build a business plan. Get an appointment on the schedule of the CEO or the president. Don't go below that. President, CFO, get in front of them, present your business plan to solve the problem, and then go and solve it. And a lot of times people don't want to do it. And I think they don't want to do it for two reasons. One is they're not they don't believe in it enough. But I think more importantly, they're scared that they'll fail, and or they're scared that they'll lose their job. But I don't think any CEO would fire you if you came in with a well thought out business plan, presented it to him, and said, "Here's how to solve a problem." I think he'd appreciate it. But if he did fire you over it, well, you really don't want to work for that company anyway. But the other reason, failure, I can't tell you how many times I've failed. I consider my first business a complete failure. Even though I learned a lot from it, it was a complete failure. And I can't kid anybody about that. And I've tried other things that have failed, but failure is a part of life and living. And I tell that to people all the time. I don't know any business person who has made it from the first time they tried anything. So that was that. That was that business. And what else did I do? Oh, I we opened up a store because we were in very Washington D.C. centric. The question was at one of the board meetings: would the business survive outside of D.C.? Could the business survive outside of D.C.? And came upon a location in about 25 miles up the road, and we opened up that store. Put some management in to run it. It wasn't doing so well, and I got a call one day from the president. I was out at one of the facilities. He called me up and he brought me in at like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night, and said, the store is doing horribly, and it's a management issue. So you're going to go up and fix it. It was your idea to put this store there, and so you're going to go up and fix it. You're going to be the store manager. You can train a new staff, and however long it takes you, that's how long it's going to take. And in the meanwhile, you still have to do your other job. So I did that and hired, they did give me extra assistant store managers to compensate, but because I did have to go back and forth. But, we did get this store back on track, but it was a learning experience for the company because it proved to me that what I thought was correct, which was the smaller stores, I thought was the rollout concept, not the bigger stores, and this sort of reinforced that to me. So, long story short, we wound up raising capital. Some other company came in and bought us. I believed in the small store concept. They did not. I tried to buy them. They didn't want to sell them, or they wanted to sell them, but for a ridiculous amount of money. They wanted to focus on building bigger stores. I like the smaller store concept. So, but we couldn't come to a deal. So I said, well, I'll just do it myself. So I left and I founded another company called the Daily Market, which were grab and go meal stores. And my concept was that when you're in an urban environment, you're downtown and you're paying, upwards of, you could be paying $100 a square foot. You don't want to be making product in the back room at $100 a square foot. It's not efficient. So because I had this commissary experience with Sutton Place, I went to a company that did food production, not that far away. And so that was sort of the backbone of this business. We get a delivery every morning of the products that we needed. We would assemble things at the store level, assembling salads, assembling sandwiches, heating up soup, that type of thing, making coffee. We were getting bread delivered in. We were getting bagels delivered in, that type of stuff. So we didn't manufacture anything. We assembled, but we didn't manufacture. And, it was a good concept. We had a couple of great locations. And then we built another store close to the White House, and then we needed more capital. So we went out looking for capital from structured capital, private equity people. And we did raise it. We raised it from a company out of North Carolina. And, I think you've heard on a couple of other shows about excuse me, it's allergy season, but you've heard, us talk about it on a couple of other shows about, raising capital today for I think entrepreneurs is almost like a badge of honor, but they don't understand, if you've never done it before, you don't understand the restrictions involved with it and the penalties and the trouble. Once you sign that agreement, once you take that step, you're no longer in charge, and you're no longer the main owner, right? Raising capital is a very unique and difficult thing. And I'm going to have a show just entirely devoted to raising capital so people can understand it. And I'm going to have some private equity people on that truly understand it or truly can explain it from their perspective and why they do what they do. But anyway, so we did raise capital, and um, we we built a number of stores. But here is the other problem, and this is something that they never teach you about, and you can never learn it in a school, in a book. I don't care where you read it, but you're out there looking for locations, and you find great locations. And at the time, this was late 90s, early 2000s. At the time, we're competing for locations against Starbucks, who has all the money in the world. We're competing against fast casual restaurants, right? Bagel guys, bread bakers, because we're all looking for the same type of footprint with the same type of foot traffic. And we would walk into a real estate guy, a landlord, and make an offer for X dollars per square foot, and a day later he'd call us up and say, no, forget it, Starbucks came in and offered, $120 a square foot, and we can't, there's no way we can do it. And so we struggled. That was our restriction to growth. It wasn't capital, it wasn't concept, it wasn't labor, it was access to locations. And that's not something that people talk about, people you hear about, not something that and I think what happens is it does happen to a lot of companies, but then they wind up getting secondary locations. And then when you get a secondary location, you're struggling to get people in, right? You're spending money on marketing, because the beauty of a great location is you're spending less to get people in, right? We were trying to look for locations that were right on top of the metro. You got 10,000 people, 20,000 people coming out of those metros every day. You just have to peel off a percentage of it, right? And you don't have to do a lot of marketing. But when you're in a secondary location, it's really difficult. And people do it, but usually at scale, right? A Panera Bread can go into, a Starbucks can go into, some of the Chipotle can go into the secondary locations, and people are going to go because they built up such a reputation. But we were still starting out. And so, that was our restriction to growth. And it was a very difficult time for us. But, we did get a number of stores open. And then the private equity firm that had invested in us said, hey, if you're having problems finding locations to growth, let's go and acquire somebody who has the types of locations you want. Independent bakeries, independent coffee shops, independent, wherever. So we tried that route, and we negotiated with two different companies, spent a lot of time trying to come to an agreement, couldn't come to an agreement. And so we wound up in a situation where now one of the big guys is coming to us to buy the locations, to buy us, right, to buy the locations. And the private equity guys are like, hey, this is a business. We put the money in, we're going to make a determination as to what happens, right? So I'm not in a position where I can say, no, I don't want to do that, right? I don't hold the cards any longer. Myself and my partner at the time, we were minority at that point in terms of shareholders. So we had no choice but to go along, and we did. And the company was acquired by a supermarket chain, actually, and I wound up having to go work for that supermarket chain. And the only reason was they liked what I did from the supply chain side of not manufacturing. And the supermarket chain was somebody heavily invested in preparation at the store level. They had big delis, they had food service, they had big bakeries, etc., and taking up a lot of square footage. So I wound up having to go work for them, which it wasn't exactly the greatest for me. And again, I'll tell you that story. I have to take a quick break and a quick commercial message, and I'll be back to tell you the story of another entrepreneurship story.
Hello, join me, Stacy Bullock, host of Tools for Everyday Living on E360's Positive Vibrations channel every Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on E360 TV.
And we're back. Thank you for that. So I wind up working for this company, and this is a bigger company, very structured, not something I'm used to. I'm used to smaller, nimble. I don't do well with politics. I don't do well with structured, silos, and you can't do this because that's, Bob's division, or you can't bring up a problem because that's, it didn't make sense to me. So I did ruffle a little feather. I ruffled some feathers. I'm not gonna lie, but again, yeah, entrepreneurship. Um, came up with some supply chain models for the perishable side of the business, which allowed a store. So you figure if you're a supermarket, right, you've got an 80,000 square foot store or 70,000 square foot store, but yet 20 to 25% of that space that you're paying rent on is devoted to production and manufacturing of product, right? When your job is to sell to customers, it's inefficient. There's especially when you lack certain categories that are expected today by consumers, right? Housewares, wine departments, things like that in that particular class of supermarket. So I started to streamline the supply chain, which was the right thing to do. I created a business plan, presented it to the board. I told them exactly what I was going to do. Everybody, was like, that's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. The problem where it fell apart, and again, this was a failure, but it fell apart. And the reason it did was culture, something I never thought of, because I think to myself, everybody's like me. They look at it and they go, this is a problem. Here's a solution. Let's go fix it. But that's not what happens. People get stuck. It's like, this is how we've always done it. And you're coming in here, you're an outsider, and you're shaking things up, and this isn't what's going to work, and you don't know what you're doing, and you don't know what you're talking about. And it didn't work. I mean, I was there for about 4 years. It actually, I'm not going to say it didn't work. It did actually work, but it didn't work with me, because when I left, then, they just somebody else took the mantle up and kept running with it. And eventually, it did start to yield what was expected, but I did not do well with all the naysaying and all the, problems. I don't react well when everybody sits there and says no without trying. If you want to do it and it falls apart, and then you want to say, hey, Phil, you don't know what you're talking about, that I'm all for it. And that happens. But, anyway, but culture, I think, was something that I never expected to get in the way. And so that stuck with me. Again, this goes back to my first business, right? Leadership, managing process, because you don't manage people, you lead people, you manage process, and not allocating resources correctly, not transferring skills. And so, culture became a big part of it, because, I said to myself, I'm always going to have a culture. I'm always going to build a company with a culture where everybody knows where we're heading. Everybody knows what we're doing. Everybody's got to say, if you think I'm doing something wrong and you feel like you want to tell me that respectfully, I'll listen. If you think you have a better idea, you think that there's a better approach, and I've done that, through everything I've done thereafter. But that made a big impact on me, the whole culture piece. I did a short stint after that with a a small convenience store chain. The objective was to get them into the food business, similar to when you see, I don't know, you see some of these convenience stores today where they've really taken a direction of making sandwiches, high quality products, making sandwiches and better coffee, and not just the same old, garbage. There's a lot of them out there, Sheetz, Wawa, those types of guys. Some of the supermarket chains own some. I think Kroger owns, some convenience stores, but nonetheless, so that was the objective. But there and again, I sort of bumped up against culture, because the people in the company didn't like the changes, and so it didn't, I didn't last long. It wasn't for me, and that was fine. And then from there, we had the opportunity to build a skincare line with a supermodel, and we wound up saying, hey, this would be a great concept on the shopping channel. So we went to HSN, and we wound up with a very good deal to launch the product. And everybody said, oh, it's great. You're going to be so successful because you have a supermodel who's, not just a spokesperson, but a partner in the business. Because I'm not a big believer in just spokespeople. I think sometimes, unless they're very authentic, and it's authentic if you're part of the company and you say, hey, it's my ideas and I'm the one developing these skincare products because I'm with a bunch of guys and they don't know anything about skincare, which is true. And, I'm in the labs and I'm doing the development, which is great. We wound up, after doing our first set of shows, it was interesting because you get immediate feedback doing shopping channel work, doing work on the shopping channel, somewhat the same on e-commerce, but we were selling in the shopping channels. We were selling on Amazon. We were selling on our own e-commerce stores. We were selling here domestically as well as in Canada. And it was interesting after the first set of shows because people did not respond well to a supermodel that was dressed up like a supermodel. They felt like, well, the product, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to buy the product because she's going to look good no matter what. So using the product isn't going to make me look like her. She's a supermodel. Her hair's done. She's got makeup on. So we got that feedback immediately, and we made changes immediately. And we said, you're going to have to dress down for these shows, khakis, maybe a polo shirt, her hair pulled back, no makeup, and see if the customers respond better. And through a bit of coaching also on how to sell the product, touch the product, and use the product. It was interesting. It was the first time that we had done shopping channel work, and I thought it was great. I love that channel. If I ever have other products that would be applicable for it, I would love to do it. I think it's a great selling channel. I think it's great for a brand because it builds brand awareness nationwide very rapidly, because you would be amazed at how many people watch shopping channels. And so it allowed us to then, as we entered retail, to be in a position of power, so to speak, because I think people don't necessarily understand how that channel works. I'll give you a quick understanding. You have a product. Let's say you have a product that's similar to a product that's already on the shelf. Now you're walking into a supermarket and you have no power because they already have that problem solved. They already have a product to solve that problem. So you're going in there and you're saying to yourself, I want you to buy my product. Well, the buyer is going to protect his margin, right? Because that's his KPI. Excuse me, sales and margin. So you're going to go in there and you're going to say, hey, I want you to buy my product. And then they say, well, there's only so much shelf space, so somebody has to come out. So if I'm going to take this product out and put your product in, this product drives this much money in gross profit and profit to me and sales. So you have to hit these hurdles, because if you don't, over this time period, you're out. So, and it's really difficult unless you sort of have a plan to build that brand or to build your product's recognition, which is costly, advertising and such. So you're at a disadvantage, so to speak. But because we were so well known after doing the shopping channels here and in Canada and selling on Amazon and selling on our website, we had retailers calling us, which is the position you want to be in. So retailers calling us and saying, hey, we want to put your product in, which we did. And so we didn't have to play with all the mucky muck of these battles that people encounter. So it was extremely fruitful and interesting, and we were rolling along, and we were doing shows, and again, it was a lot of trouble, but it was a lot of fun, and we wound up selling that company. And at the same time as we were selling that company, we had the idea for another company. The supermodel and I had to stay on for a period of time to do the marketing while they were doing it, but for I think we were a year or two. But in the meantime, I had this idea my partner at the time and I had this idea for doing razors. Everybody, we saw it just like everybody else did. The price of razors was out of control. And so where we were different was there's very limited manufacturers of razors in the world. There's, Gillette, there's Schick, there's a place in Korea, and there's, a couple of manufacturers over in Asia, and there was a German manufacturer. And as you see today, I'm sure you've all heard of Dollar Shave Club, Harry's, etc. We were right in that mix. And, Dollar Shave Club did a really good job creating that video, which got tremendous play, right? Tremendous play all around the world. And we didn't have that. And so we struggled. We struggled the first, year or so with trying to get people to the site, trying to get people to buy the product. And we came up with this concept, this idea. And so what we did was we offered, and you can go out there and you can check, it's still out there today. You can go online and you can search Phil Masiello 800 razors, Brian Wilson. There was this baseball player, Brian Wilson. If any of you are baseball fans, he was a pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. Guy had an epic beard, epic. It was beautiful. And he was he got injured, had Tommy John surgery. They traded him, sent him to the Dodgers, and he was going to pitch for the first time in a year. And so we sent a note to his people, his management, and said, "We'll offer $1 million if you'll shave with our razor," right? And we knew that we would have enough stipulations, like we wanted him to do it on the pitching mound at Dodger Stadium in his uniform, which MLB would never allow. But we didn't care. We all we needed to get back was something from them that said, we'll talk to Brian about it, right? Because now we could say we're in negotiations with Brian Wilson to shave his beard. That's what we needed to do, right? That's all we needed, which we got. And we ran with it, and it got picked up everywhere. And this was the dawn of social media. Facebook was out there. Instagram wasn't out there yet. A couple other ones were out there, and it just exploded. Like, we had people sending us pictures of, different body parts saying, "I'll shave this, I'll shave that for $10,000. I'll shave this for $5,000, and then we had people saying, "How could you offer a millionaire money to shave?" And people were outraged at us, but we were getting interviewed daily from television, radio, newspapers. Again, if it's still out there, if you go and you look at, Phil Masiello 800 razors.com and Brian Wilson, you'll see it was all over the place. Japan, France, everybody. And so, that kicked us off. That we got orders out of that. People were, recognized the site then, and they started coming. And, those things tend to, what I call, what I would call, I don't even know what the term is anymore. I think, some people call it guerrilla marketing. I just say breaking through the clutter. And so, one of the, so the funny effect of that, or the funny effect of that was, like, these things, they go and then they die off after a couple of days, right? And you think, okay, well, it's over. Well, what happened was, so it started to die off probably after a week. What happened was TMZ catches Brian Wilson coming out of a gym in LA. And they say, "Are you going to take the $1 million? You're going to take the $1 million to shave off your beard?" And he says, "No." He goes, "I'm not shaving this beard off for any amount of money." Well, the whole thing starts again, because now everybody's outraged that a guy would turn down $1 million to shave off his beard. And it started up again. And people were yelling at us and screaming at us. And how could we? There are people starving in the world. And, you're giving out $1 million to a guy. And we were like, we didn't give anybody anything yet. We just made him an offer. And so, but it was very funny, and something that I think about all the time. And I tell people the story, not because I want to brag about something that we did, but in this day and age, you have a product, and you're trying to sell that product. How are you going to break through the clutter? Like, what are you going to do that's going to get attention to your product, right? So again, first business, leadership, process, not good at it. It was a disaster, even financially. I think it was a disaster. You know, culture, in other businesses, and now, I'm looking at how to break through the clutter because we're struggling. So, all these pieces sort of come together for you, and you have to constantly think about it. So, those of you who have products out there, those of you who are thinking about launching, I mentor at the University of Maryland School of Entrepreneurship. Um, Although I haven't been doing it recently since COVID, it's gotten a little bit crazy. But anyway, I tell all those guys the same thing because, what I find with young entrepreneurs is everybody spends so much time focused on the development of the product, the development of what they're doing, that they miss the marketing. And the marketing is the most important piece because how are you going to get it in the customer's hands? How are you going to get, I don't care what product you have. I don't care if it's a SaaS product, a software product. You have to you have to get customers to buy it, whether they're business customers, whether they're, individuals, whether they're consumers, you still have to get somebody to buy it. So what are you going to do that's different? And, we used to toss around so many different ideas, some on the vulgar side, some on the, on the straight side. But that one hit, and that one, helped us out, tremendously. And we wound up, after a couple of years, selling that business prematurely. Again, I had investors, and not private equity investors, but individuals. But again, once you take money from people, you're no longer in charge, right? You may own a percentage, but you don't own the bulk of it. So you're not making 100% of the decisions. So, again, when we talk to people, and we've said it on the show a number of times, you've heard it from a number of entrepreneurs on the show saying the same thing, that raising capital is almost like a badge of honor to young entrepreneurs, but it really isn't, because it's a double-edged sword. You're not where you think you are. You're not immediately going to be this huge bonanza billionaire. That's very few. Most of us toil away every single day, coming up with businesses, working, just like everybody else. And, the only difference is you sort of work for yourself. You set your own parameters, you set your own drive. But, raising capital, again, it's not always what you wanted. And we wound up selling it. I felt it was premature. I had other ideas because it wasn't about the razors. Everybody thought it was about the razors. It wasn't about the razors. Razors were sort of a tripwire. Razors they got a lot of attention because everybody uses razors. My idea was to sell more skincare, right? Because we had a shave cream, aftershave, men, women. We had all kinds of products. We had other shaving products, everything to try and drive the average sale up and get us into other categories. And we had plans to do other categories, but the razors were such a focus at that point in time. There were so many competitors out there. So many people want to get in that business. And so we wound up selling. And, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was a little bit, lost a bit because it wasn't part of the plan to sell that quickly. And, what happened was one of our suppliers, one of our partners in that business, said after we sold, "Hey, why don't you help us do a direct-to-consumer business? We need website, we need Amazon help." And by then I was an expert on Amazon. I've been working on Amazon for by then 10 years or so, maybe more. But since they first started allowing other sellers on the platform, other than books and CDs and music, which I think was around 2006. Anyway, so then I was asked to do this, so I started doing it, and then another person called up and said, "Hey, can you help?" And the next thing I knew, I had this small little agency helping e-commerce people and focusing on e-commerce. And so from there, it just sort of it grew. And we focus primarily at Crunch Growth on e-commerce brands. We deal with a lot of things on Amazon, build websites, host websites, manage websites, do the advertising, come up with the marketing, come up with the focus, things like that. And we don't work with resellers. We don't believe in that platform. A lot of resellers on Amazon. We do a lot with e-commerce websites, linking them to Amazon, because when you start thinking about how the customer journey, when the customer hears about you, whether it's from an ad or whether it's from a newspaper article or wherever, the customer hears about you, the first thing they do is they go to your website, and what they're looking for is they want to see if you're legitimate, but they're not going to give you your credit card right away. So a lot of people think, yeah, I put up a website, I put my product on a website, and boom, I run some ads, and there's going to be huge demand coming to my website, and I have this great product, and it's going to be great. Well, I wish it worked that way, but it doesn't. It's a lot of work. It's hard. It's difficult. You have to really, especially today, there's so much clutter out there that you really running ads is almost ineffective, and you have to start thinking outside the box. Unless you have some product that's, and there are some out there that just immediately hit a nerve, and people go and they start buying them, that type of, but that's lightning in a bottle, and it doesn't happen too often. So, when you're, when you're out there doing it, on e-commerce, you have to sort of understand really who your customer is. You really have to think about, and if you go to my website, you'll see I write a lot about building a brand persona, and the reason I do is not just to look at demographic or psychographic information, but it's really to understand who you're talking to, because you can give the brand persona a name. So, for example, one client we have has a very male focused product, and so we built a brand persona. We have a name for it, and we're marketing to that person. And I really got to understand that mentality when I was doing Home Shopping Network and meeting with the people there. Because from the CEO on down, everybody said, well, they used to talk about the customer, and they'd say, well, she's going to do this, or she needs to understand this. And I kept saying, well, who's she? And they knew that's our customer. Our customer is predominantly women. Yes, certainly men watch it, but our customer is predominantly women, and this is who she is. And when we talk about her. And they had a name for her. And that's who they were talking to, because she exemplified who their ideal customer was. So it's a lot easier then to get into your head and get into all your people's head. And again, going back to culture, getting to everybody's head, who you're talking to, right? And who you're marketing to, because now you're no longer marketing to this esoteric area of, this person that's 18 to 26 years old and blah, 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 blah. No. I'm marketing to Bob, or I'm marketing to Jane, or I'm marketing to, whoever. And then it makes you understand a little bit better how to frame your messaging and frame your visuals and frame your whole process. So, that's sort of how we try and guide people. But the ideal scenario is that, hey, we are a service provider, and we get to be exposed to all these different areas. The bad part about it is that we don't really have a say. We can only offer guidance. We can't really change the world, right? If people don't believe you, they're not going to do it. And if people don't want to listen to you, they're not going to do it. So all we can do is just continue to make suggestions. Some people take our advice, some people don't, but even when we market our own business, we definitely have to keep that in mind, that who we're talking to. But it's a lot easier with consumer products. We're very focused on consumer products. That's probably 90% of what we do, because we try and understand the consumer so well. And anybody starting a business, I don't care what business you start, I don't care who you are, I don't care what product you sell. You have to understand who your customer is, because if you don't, and you haven't spent the time, you're just going to spin your wheels and waste a lot of money and time and effort. So you have to really think about, who am I talking to? Who is the customer? What am I talking about to them? And again, I think, sometimes with entrepreneurs, there's this expectation that you need to help them. And that's what we do. We sort of help them understand who who they're marketing to and how they're marketing, and getting them to focus on the customer. Because so many times, I mean, it's amazing to me how much time people will spend developing their product and leave no money for marketing. And everybody thinks that you can just market for free online, but you can't. It doesn't work that way. In the old days, when before we had search engines and before we had any of the things we have today, advertising or any of that, it was all about the URL. If you had the right URL, people would type in their search and it would go to your URL. And that was great, but there were only like, 50, 60, e-commerce stores up at the time. But the world changed, since then. But today you actually really have to understand what's happening. And, so many people that we come in contact with just think that we're full of it. I mean, I can tell you tons of clients that have, didn't start out with us because they just didn't believe us. They got somebody else who told them, yeah, we can do it for, this. And then it never happened. And then they came back and said, so anyway, that's sort of what we do today. And then, we get involved in other things, but we like clients that, sort of have good products that will listen, and we do try and sell. We sell a lot on Amazon. I mean, if you look, I've written a lot about Amazon. I've written stories. I get interviewed about it a lot. Amazon's a good channel, but you really have to know. And this has come up again recently with another client, because you really have to engineer your product to fit the channel you're selling in. A lot of people don't realize it. I think they think, hey, I'm just gonna sell to Walmart. I'm going to sell to Amazon. I'm going to sell here. I'm going to sell there. But you have to make sure you understand the economics of your business and the economics of your product, because if you're going into those channels, you have to understand the economics of the channel and what the channel expects. Because I know a lot of people that are struggling on Amazon because they don't have enough gross margin, or they didn't expect to spend X amount of dollars on marketing or advertising. And Amazon, there's a lot of great things about it, but in a lot of categories, it's not a great channel to launch products in. It's a great channel when you've built up credibility with your product and externally, because again, when a customer hears about your product, first thing they do, they go to your website, they look, they see, but they're not going to buy because they don't trust you yet. They're not going to give you your credit card information. Then they go to your social media channel. They look at your social media channel because they want to see how you're talking and if your brand is congruent to what they see on your website. And then they go to Amazon to buy. And they go to Amazon to buy because they trust Amazon. So they'll see if your product's on Amazon, and then they'll buy it there. They know that if they have any problems, Amazon's got an A to Z guarantee. They'll get their money back. They won't have any issues. So it's important to understand that flow online, and they may see your product, again, they may hear about it on, in the press. And I'll tell you, one of the most overlooked areas for entrepreneurs when you're launching something is in fact the press. Trying to get PR, trying to get your press out there, your name out there in the press. It's more fruitful than running ads sometimes, because, more people see it, more people hear about it. When we hear a lot about influencers, right? Influencers are sort of disconnected from your product. Maybe it's somebody that you see on Instagram or whatever, but it's about influence. And that's a big difference between an influencer and influence. The press influences, some of these magazines online influence. So if you can get an article talking about your product, you can get an article where it's comparing your product, or top 10 lists, or the best Father's Day gifts, or, the best gifts for the best deals on Amazon today, and that's influence. It's probably more effective than getting, 100 influencers on Instagram to talk about your product. And I'm not slamming influencers. They have their place, but again, you have to be careful, and you have to really understand your customer to find the right influencer. So Yeah, that's so it's been interesting. I apologize, no guest tonight. They called at the last minute, couldn't do it. They had some sort of an emergency, but I thought it was still a good idea because you're rather than canceling the show because you're sitting here every week listening to me interview people and you're going, who is this guy? What credibility does he have? I've written a couple of books. You can find them on Amazon. I just wrote a new one on entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs through history, which it's a fun read. It goes back and all the way to the times of the pharaohs and talking about entrepreneurship. So if you're into that, it's sort of an interesting read. It's a quick read, very short stories. Um, yeah, I have it right. It's on Amazon. It's called, this is a sample copy. It's not for resale, but it's Empires and Entrepreneurs, how business shaped, the world. And it's really it's stories of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship throughout history. So if you like that kind of stuff, it's on Amazon. And, if you have the Kindle, app, I think you can get it for a really good price. I think it's inexpensive. So, but yeah, again, it's just fun to do that kind of stuff because I learn a lot from it. So I put it together. And then the last thing is, I put this together. If you go to my website, philmasiello.com, and you put in your email address, there's a pop-up window. Put in your name and your email address. I'll email you a free startup planning guide. I put it together. You don't have to pay for it. I don't. There's nothing. No cost, but it's a really good guide for those of you who are looking at starting a business, because I took all this knowledge I have and all these sort of problems that I've encountered, and I put it together in this little pamphlet that you can fill out. It asks you questions and it sort of guides you through the process. And I think it's a great tool and I've used it for a number of younger guys, and they find it to be a great tool. Because I think, I've always looked at business planning tools and some of the online ones, but in my opinion, they get so overcomplicated. Another one of our shows we're going to do is how to present or how to pitch to investors, because there's going to be a time when you're going to have to. And it's not just pitching to investors, but pitching your concept or your product to, you may have to do it in school, you may have to do it to retailers, right? So anyway, how to do that, because I think sometimes people overcomplicate it when you really have to focus on about 6 slides, maybe 10 slides max. Anyway, we're out of time now, and I'm happy you joined us today. I hope you got a lot out of it. I enjoyed doing it. I could talk about myself for days, in case you haven't noticed, but it's a lot of fun. Next week we have a great guy coming on, a guy who started ice cream stores and ice cream in retail, and really got some funny stories to tell about his startup endeavors. So it's been it's been a great reception so far to the shows. And we've got some great ones coming up, so stick with us, and you'll learn a lot, and we'll have a lot of fun. All right, have a good night, and thanks for joining us.